Around the world, triathlon is organized in a lot of different ways, and there can be a lot of different types of races and categories. So today I'm going to tell you guys how triathlon works in Canada, and maybe you guys can let me know how it works where you're from too. So the first series we can talk about is the Junior Elite Race Series, which is a draft legal race which basically uses all the same rules as the ITU Pros, but the race is a sprint distance instead of an Olympic. And these races are all across Canada. There's at least one in every province every year. And when you compete in these races, you collect points at every race, and by the end of the year, the winner of the series will be determined by who has the most points overall. Next, we can talk about the amateur races, which aren't really universal throughout the country, but most provinces will have some sort of way of collecting points and getting stuff within their own province. But most of these races also all have the same rules throughout the country. I've actually competed in some in Quebec and Edmonton and different provinces where I've seen that most of the rules are all the same and they use about the same format in every race too. So the main difference between Junior Elite and the amateur races is that Junior Elite is just such a higher level of competition, is all the best in Canada, and the amount of training and effort and time required to be good in the sport is just so much higher than the level of the people that are racing the amateur races. I actually did race a few Junior Elite races, and I trained with the Junior Elite team in Manitoba for a little while, but it just realized that it just wasn't something for me. I just wasn't good enough, and I didn't want to spend the effort and the time training for a sport that I didn't think I was going to be one of the best at. So the series that I race in is most of these amateur races throughout Manitoba and Canada. So first of all, these races are non-draft legal, except we actually had one now since the ITU has made the grand final a draft legal race. So there has to be a draft legal race in each province to be able to qualify to go to the grand final. So the first race of the season this year, which I actually made a little video about, was a draft legal race, so I couldn't use my time trial bike, and there was a lot more rules just to make sure that it was in compliance with the ITU rules, and I actually did qualify, by the way. Back to the amateur races. So these races are obviously non-draft legal. They usually have a sprint and an Olympic distance race, and usually they're on the same day, and they'll also usually be some sort of duathlon or aquathon. They like to incorporate a lot of those things into the triathlon races on the same days at different times. So what happens most of the time is the Olympic race will be about 45 minutes or an hour before the sprint race, which allows the Olympic guys to finish their swim, and then the sprint race will be able to start with no one else in the water. So how these amateur races usually start is they'll separate the men and the women, and all the men will go together and all the women will go together. They don't separate by age group, since here in Canada the age groups start at 16 to 19 and then 20 to 25, so they're very small groups of just 5 years, so there wouldn't be enough people to have like different waves. So to do most of these amateur races you have to be at least 16 years old, and I believe to do Olympic races you have to be 18. I actually just turned 18, so I'm gonna try one this year and see how it goes, and hopefully I'll start only racing Olympic distance by next year. For how the format of these races usually work, most of the time, in my experience, it's been beach starts where you just run into the water and start, and a couple of them have been in water starts where you actually go in the water first and then you start while you're in the water. In the ITU Grand Final in like Edmonton, it was a diving start where you actually dive off a dock. So this can change from race to race, but in my experience, beach starts and water starts are the most popular. And how the timing and stuff works is everyone usually has a chip in every single race I've been to. You just put a chip on your ankle, and most of the time you get body markings on your arms with like your age group and your race number. You also usually will receive a swim cap with your number on it, and usually there's different colors for Olympic and sprint distance so they can, tell who is who. In transition, there's always a rack for sprint distance racers and Olympic distance racers, and most of the time the transitions are pretty simple and actually seem really fair. As always, there's like a mount and dismount line, and you usually kind of have to run around transition to make sure that everyone goes the same distance, but I think that's probably about the same everywhere in the world. One thing that I have noticed that in Manitoba is kind of different than most provinces is that here we don't get our transition times. They usually just kind of get mixed into the swim and the bike or the run. but I've been to some in Quebec where they actually will give you your time exactly for the swim. There'll be a mat as soon as you get out of the water, and then there'll be another one as soon as you get out of transition, so you know your transition times. And I think that would be something that would be really good to improve here in Manitoba, where I do most of my racing. So lastly, we can kind of talk about how the prizes work. So basically in Manitoba, there's no funding for triathlon. Like, no one really cares about triathlon here, so no one really gets any prizes or anything when you even win a race. So if someone wins the race, basically they get these points that count for the Triathlon Manitoba like series or whatever. So then you get these points and they count them up, and at the end of the year, whoever has the most points for getting whatever place in whatever race in Manitoba will win the whole series. So you'd think that if you won the whole series in Manitoba, you'd get something really cool, but no. You just get a piece of paper that says, congratulations on getting first. And then maybe they'll give you like a water bottle or something. Racing in other provinces, they actually have a lot more funding, and they actually care about the sport a lot more. And you actually get a medal for first, second, third in every age group. And it's really cool that they actually acknowledge when people do well in their races. So that's how triathlon works in most of Canada. If you're from Canada and I said something wrong, be sure to leave it down below. But that's my experience anyways. If you guys are from a different country, I'd love to hear how everything is different where you guys are from. Be sure to like and subscribe as always if you want to see more triathlon videos. I'll see you guys in the next one, and peace out.